Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment, another chapter of the All-American-Bigways Big Wave Fundamentals online tutorial. As always, my name is Doug Barron, and with me is Gorka.
Hello?
And today we are going to go over chapter 3, which is approaching the formation. In this chapter, we're going to learn the sight picture of the exit frame and identify the base, understanding how to best intercept the base using our radials, recognizing and adjusting to the formation's fall rate using the stadium, and then preparing yourself for the possible what if scenarios. Because remember, we always talk in theory and we strive for perfection, but spoiler alert, that doesn't happen all the time.
That's right. So let's start with the exit frame. What is the exit frame? The exit frame is what the entire formation with everybody involved, including the planes and including the base, looks like the moment you step out of the plane, the moment you actually hit the wind. And what you're going to see depends on four different factors mainly. Number one is the plane position, and that is your plane relative to the lead plane if you're not exiting from the lead plane. Your position, your own exiting slot, right? Whether am I number 22 as the latest diver or am I number 3 as an early floater? Number 3, the base's actual launch. And number 4, your launch particularly, right? So if you have a good exit versus you're on your back, the exit that is going to have an impact into your exit frame. So let's talk about plane position first. Number one is plane position according to plan, right? And what I mean by that is that if you are on a plane, let's take this formation as an example. We have one left trail, the plane A, then we have a lead plane, plane B, and you can kind of see the diagram of the flying formation in the upper left corner. Then two right trail planes, C and D. The side picture and the exit frame of C and D are inherently different because of how much farther out airplane D is compared to the lead plane than compared to airplane C. So that's number one, right? So even according to plan, your side picture is going to be, and your exit frame will be different. It will feel a lot farther. You have to fly a lot more if you're exiting from an airplane that is starting farther out. In this example, we're looking at a right trail floating side exit frame where you can kind of see the earlier floaters are already starting to intercept. We have mid divers starting to get out, and the late divers are still in the plane. Fairly typical. You probably have seen this in a bunch of other videos. One thing that I also wanted to mention is that in the walk, we try to the most realistic way possible, try to see this exit frame. And many times we walk from the exit frame before we move on to the stadium, as in what is it that we are going to see when we hit the wind. But understand that my hitting the wind, if I am slot number 3, let's say D3, and you're hitting the wind, if you are D22, happen at a different time. There might be a 4 or 5 second gap. What that means is that by the time you see your exit frame, I may already be in the stadium or I may already be intercepting, right? So we don't do that in the walk because realistically, we can't really do it all that well, but that's how it happens in real life. Okay. The other example that I wanted to show is what that looks like if I am actually leaving from the lead plane. Let's say this could be the view of a super floater, a videographer, or even in chapter 2, we showed what would happen if we had floaters coming from the lead plane when the base was walking out. It would be something very similar to this. In this particular case, we're seeing an 8-way chunk. It is likely just a super floater. There cannot be too many people on the outer side of the red line, as we explained in chapter 2, because of the center of gravity. And it's likely to just be this one person, but it would look something very similar. And when we get out, we want to continue looking up to make sure that we present correctly, right? We can kind of see the early divers already, early and mid divers already coming out of this B plane. And then from the other side, it looks kind of mirrored to what we were showing on the right floating side, right? So in this case, we have plane A, which is immediately closest to plane B on the left side. And this is sort of like what we can expect to see, right? We're gonna see the rest of the other side of the formation, plane C and plane D. You can kind of see it here, plane D, but it's like up above there. And then kind of rows of people diving, trying to get to their stadium and their radials. What does it look like if I'm diving? Well, it's quite different actually. And this is a different event, different formation. There's only two planes here, airplane A and B, where A is the lead. It's a tailgate also, and B is also a tailgate, but it's trailing on the right. It's kind of hard to see here that it kind of looks like we're on the left, but it's actually because we're looking at it from the other perspective, sort of like from above. And this is closer to what you're going to see when we get out. This is actually a screen grab of a full video that we showed on a diving exit for chapter 2, where we were seeing what it would look like to exit from this lot. This is that exit frame shot. Okay. If we are diving, but we're from the lead plane, it's going to look something like this. The base will be right in front of you. Remember that at the beginning, if you're a late diver, you're not going to see much, and you should take care of presenting first before you go into identifying where the base is. So if you present correctly, you may actually not be able to see much or anything at all for a while, just for like 1 second to take care of that presentation before we go and identify and intercept. And lastly, I just wanted to show how plane position, even from this left side, we were showing the left trail immediately close to the lead plane. But this is what it would look like if we were exiting from an A plane, where we are exiting from the 2 planes away from the lead plane, right? In this case, we're exiting from airplane A, and we have a 6-plane formation with 2 left trails and 3 right trails. It's going to feel a lot farther, like I mentioned. And that's okay. That's just part of the game. We can't just jam all the airplanes together. And so that's plane positioning and how it could change according to plan. It's also the factor of the pilot's own expertise and performance. Obviously, we can be here on B and C plane, but if the planes are farther out because the pilots are flying farther out, that's going to have an impact on your exit frame. There are certain things that we just simply cannot plan for, right? So just keep that in mind. The other factor that we wanted to touch upon was the actual performance of the base and the launch of the base itself. We get this question many times, where it's like, well, the base wasn't where I expected it to be. And we could be like 4 or 5 jumps into the camp with the same slot, with the same base, with the same airplane formation. And the performance, that factor alone, the performance of the base will actually have an impact on your launch, on your exit frame. So I wanted to kind of explain, to just pause there and explain how the performance of the base will affect its fall rate, its direction of travel, and therefore your exit frame. So let's assume that we have a sailing base that hits the wind immediately. We're going 90, 100 miles per hour. And we hit the wind. It comes, the relative wind at the moment we exit comes from the direction where the planes are traveling towards. And we hit that base, and we use this term of sailing, which is not very academically correct, because we're actually not actually moving to the right, but we are moving away from the airplanes flying, which is where that term is coming from, right? And so in this case, we're going to have more horizontal travel from the base compared to the lead plane where they left from, and a slower fall rate to start. This is what we call as the base will sail. And this is, for the record, the ideal behavior, the sought after behavior of the base. If the base is funneling, and it doesn't have to funnel completely, where we lose grips. If there is a little bit of a bump or a grind, that will indeed affect its performance. And if that's the case, then what's going to happen is that we're going to fall a lot faster. Imagine if this was happening, if that kind of same funnel formation was happening in the flat, right? So what we would have is we would accelerate the fall rate. And that's in essence what's happening here. We are accelerating the fall rate compared to where the relative wind is coming from, which yields less horizontal travel and a faster fall rate to start. So imagine if you get out 2 seconds after the base does, you can't really see that, but it could happen, right? Why are we explaining this? Because if you can't see it, first of all, it's for awareness. Second of all, is that if as you become more and more proficient and you develop, you increase your experience and you develop your skill set and your ability to anticipate where the base is going to go, you can actually, if you are a floater, and like from the beginning, you can see the count and you can see them exiting. If you see that they're starting to have problems, you can react and anticipate to where they're going to go before they go there. Usually there is a visual component to it, in terms of what is happening in the formation, in the chunk. In this case, we're using as the baseline, we're using an 8-way chunk, but the same thing could be said for a 4-way. And anticipate to that, knowing that is going to require a lot more diving than you may anticipate, right? You may be floating and then all of a sudden you don't have to float anymore because the base just sank on you. So next time that you have that you're in a floating slot, and next time you start seeing that, try to pick up on those things the moment the base hits the wind. Doug, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say we touched on this in chapter 2 with the base shapes and sizes, and also understand that that can affect the initial presentation and the placement of the base. A smaller size base is going to look like it has a little bit more vertical fall rate, and it's not going to have as much sail as we talked about. This 8-way chunk that we have is very gripped up. It's all tight in there. There's a lot of grips on it, and it's going to look like it has more sail. So understand that as well, when you're going through the walk and you're going through the prep for the jump, that if it's a smaller chunk, or even if it's a solo person taking a chunk, their placement initially, so that you can identify, right? Because we talked about present is the first thing, we talked about that in exits, and now we're talking about all of this so that you can identify the base, and then we'll move forward from there. That the smaller the chunks are going to have what looks like less of a sail, and this 8-way chunk is going to have more of a sail. So like a 4-way is going to be less than a 6-way, a 6-way is going to be less than the 8-way, and then all of those things. Like if it's a side door aircraft and it's a 4-way exit and rolls a little bit, it's going to look like it has more vertical fall rate initially. So that's going to change your sight picture as you're identifying the base, line of flight, and the heading for all of those things.
Yeah, the easiest way to gauge whether or not a formation is going to sell, without all things being equal. Let's assume optimal performance. Let's assume that the base does what it's supposed to do. Think about what the fall rate of that formation would be in the flat. The floatier the formation, the more grips are being taken on, the more the sail there is going to be. Essentially, sailing is just floating on the hill. That's essentially like it's another way to think about it. A solo flyer has the ability to fall a lot faster than an 8-way chunk. Therefore, a solo flyer as an exit will have less horizontal travel and more and faster fall rate to start. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to radials and intercepting.
Mm-hmm. So just like Orca was saying, in this chapter, we're talking about identifying the base, identifying your exit frame, using all of that to set line of flight, and then we're moving into the radial, right? Your radial of approach. So if we look at this formation, and we use this in chapter 1 as well, you can see the lines that are drawn are the radials of moving into the formation based on your slot or your sector. The yellow highlighted people are the 4-way base in the center. And what we're using is that base to set the the radial of approach. So from your exit frame, which Gorka just described, you are then moving through what we call the radial intercept zone, where you have identified the base, identified line of flight, and now you're moving into that radial intercept zone, or the sector radial, where you can move straight into the formation, right? You're seeing the base, identifying, okay, letting it set line of flight, moving into your radial line, which is called the radial intercept zone. And then from there, you'll be getting into the stadium and moving straight forward on your radial as you're approaching the formation. And so as you can see in here, there's kind of a lot going on, but you can see the center yellow highlighted circle is the base. And then if we look at this person on the bottom, almost the 6 o'clock of the screen, you can see his radial goes through the base, and then there's another person that's on the same radial that's in an opposite sector of him, and they will be moving straight on their radials into slot. On our 9 o'clock of the screen, you can see this whole sector building on this radial, right? This is their stadium, and you'll see them moving straight in, and then they will have the same radial line as the sector across from them. So the radial, like we discussed in chapter 1, is the line that you want to move straight forward in as you're moving down the stadium and approaching the formation. That is set based off of the identification of the base and line of flight, and then where your radial line is off of that. That line, we want to move straight on that line as we approach the formation, so that we don't have any crossing patterns or anything like that through approach. So the radial is the line, and then the stadium, which we're going to start talking about next, is how we're approaching the formation, moving down the stadium into our slot into the red zone, which we discussed in chapter 1.
Yep, let's go ahead and talk about the stadium.
Okay, so stadium approach, right? We've all seen a sporting event or a concert or something like that. And essentially, the playing field is the base and the formation that you're building. And then you can see, like, you know, the outsides of the end zone there, that would be kind of where the red zone is. And as a spectator, you're up in the stands, you know. When you first start, you know, you are in the nosebleed section, and then you're moving down the stadium on a straight line on your radial onto the playing field, which would then be the red zone, and then moving straight into the formation as you approach. It's a pretty simple explanation, but we don't need to make it any more complicated than that. The stadium is super important because that is how you preserve your levels as you're approaching the formation. Right? You can't take the seat in front of you until that person has taken the seat in front of them. And we want to be able to see that person in our approach to the formation. As they're moving down, I'm moving down with them, approaching the formation.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing is, well, why do we use this approach? It's actually very simple. It allows for the most visibility for everybody, right? It allows you to absorb what is going on in the formation, what is going on to your sides, if you have the ability to look through your periphery and across from you, right? One thing that we try to absorb as part of this approach is actually the fall rate of the formation. Understand that from the moment the exit happens and the base goes, let's say that we go from an eggway chunk to a star, which is a fairly common thing to do for bigways. That fall rate for that A-way star is going to be a lot faster than as people start getting on it. Right. So if I am I'm the fourth line and I'm toward like the second ring out, I'm pretty far out. It's always better to keep the stadium approach and continually gauging and evaluating the fall rate of the formation, because it will change, right? The fall rate of the formation when you are up here will not be the same. It may, if it is really, really good flyers that are keeping the fall rate when they dock on the formation. But just even without realizing, it starts to slow down just a little bit, just a tad. We've seen that we've analyzed fall rate data, and it's virtually impossible to get rid of some of that, right? So
Hmm.
part of our responsibility approaching the formation is to actually read how that fall rate is changing and making it part of our approach and adjusting our approach to what the formation is doing.
Yep. Just like Gorka said, I mean, gathering data, that's all we can do. We've identified line of flight, we've identified our radial, we're moving into the stadium, and we can see everything that's happening in front of us, right? If this also prevents, just like you said, anybody from going low. We always treat the stadium like it's the first point of the skydive, and now to identify like what a good stadium looks like. So you can see the people with that have lines drawn around them. That is a good stadium approach, right? They can always see the person in front of them. They can gather all that information. They can see what's going on in the base. They have a straight line across to the person on the symmetrical sector on the other side of the formation. And then if we look at the people that are in a greenish hue above them, so that would be high in the stadium, right? What we can see is that there are people underneath of them that are on the proper stadium line and angle. And if we can't see them, if you can't see those people that are in front of you, this is where we risk having, falling or backpacking someone that could be below you. So as long as everybody stays in this essentially 45-degree angle to the formation and to the red zone as we're moving into the formation, you can see everybody and you can make corrections for anything that may not be ideal. Again, if you are in the green people, this would be high in the stadium. And as somebody has the correct approach, they could be coming underneath of you because you're high, and then the risk you falling on top of them or backpacking them. Now, if we go to the opposite side, these people would be low in the stadium. This means that they are going to be struggling with fall rate, and they are likely going to go low in the formation. They are too flat of an approach as they're getting into the formation and could get caught off guard. And the same thing that can happen. The people that are in the correct stadium line, if you are low in the stadium, you could be underneath of them and then cause an issue by backpacking, or that person in the correct position falling on top of you if you're low in the stadium.
Yeah, we actually have a pretty good video that shows that approach shared by our friends at P3 Skydiving. So thank you guys for sharing this with us so we could share with everybody else. And it kind of shows that that stadium approach and how that differs person by person, and having the red zone in mind.
Yep. So as you can see, that person made their approach. They moved into their red zone. They stopped, matched the fall rate. Exactly. And now they're going to take their grips. And you can see the blue line of that person is the correct position. There's no Dan here, so we don't need to pause, but you can see the person, all right, approaching, matching their stadium. You can see that same 45 line that they're moving on. Now they're going into their stopping position as they enter the red zone, coming up. Okay. Now they'll step forward, and you can see as long as everybody behind them has that correct approach, they're all moving on that same line. They have the same stop, and the formation will build very, very smoothly throughout. Big thing is, as you're moving down the stadium, when you first learn, think of it literally like going down the stairs. Go down, go forward, go down, go forward, go down, go forward. And you want to stop at every position. The keys here, making sure that everybody is stopped, match levels, and then taking the grip here. And as you can see, if we're all in that correct stadium line, then you can see all of those people approaching in front of you. Same thing with more people here. Moving down the stadium. Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to mention is that even though the stadium approach for all these people is actually in the same angle, it's actually like sort of offset or transpose laterally depending on how far they are. And the reason is because their slot, like the person for the second person in blue or the person in white, their slot is farther out compared to, which means that their red zone is farther out compared to the first person in blue.
Exactly. Exactly.
The other
So
thing that you
based
may,
on,
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just going to say that I was just gonna say that the other thing that you may have been able to pick up on body position here is that the level of aggressiveness that is allowed decreases the closer you get to the formation, right? So the closer we get to the formation, we're going slower, 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 slower to make sure that we don't impact the formation too bad.
Now, if we look at the guy in red here, this is flat in the stadium. This is too low. This is too low of an approach. And you can see now he is going to be going low because as it's building, he was too low in his stadium. And now you can see the issues that are going to arise between him, he or she, the person in white, and then the person in blue. He is now underneath that person. So you can see the difference between a flat stadium approach and then a proper stadium approach.
Great. Well, we also have a couple of pictures to show.
So, yep. So here's some good examples. We can see this person in teal. This is a pretty good stadium approach. The person in black out there to their left, also pretty good. Yep. And then we could see the person up in white, up in this top corner. That would be high in the stadium, right? That would be high. We would want them to be lower. And as you look out into the distance, kind of on the 1 o'clock line there, you can see as that sector is building, on that radial line, you can see everybody. This is a pretty good stadium for that out there. The person in blue in front of this person in teal, that's a little bit high in the stadium as well, because you can see that person is in front of the person that we're talking about here, and we would want them to be a little bit lower in that stadium. Same thing, another POV shot here. The green helmet and the black helmet right here in the front of the camera, very good. They have not been keyed in to take a dock yet. Person in the teal right behind them, a little bit of a stadium as they're approaching here, ready to get in to take their grips. And then if you look across the screen, you can look up and see all of those people in proper stadiums out there on the 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock sector, looking very good. So those are some good examples of good stadiums. Another example here, right now, like 9, 10 o'clock, very nice. You can see that stadium of 3 people just built out there. Great approach. Same thing right in front at 12 o'clock. You can see that whole line is ready to come in and take their grips. So good pictures. This might be the best example we have. If we look right out here to this 9 o'clock line, you can literally see step, all the way down into the formation. And that's the ideal stadium picture for sure. Looks very good.
Yeah, I want to also bring up to the attention of, comparing this person in blue versus this person, right? So we would probably, this person is still above the formation, but we would say that they're low in the stadium, right? If they had somebody on the stadium, as Doug has mentioned, they would probably be some kind of collision or rodeo happening, and that kind of takes the entire jump out. So it is super important. Number one is prevention by having the right proper stadium. But if you see yourself, I mean, this could happen, right? Like you're like, oh, I'm too far. I should have not dropped as much. Awareness is the key. Awareness is key, right? So there's really no perfect jump. Is our ability to deal with imperfections that allow us to be successful in the long run, right? So world records happen in imperfect jumps all the time. And the reason why that is because everybody has a sense of awareness, right? We're talking about the plan and how the plan is important, and all of the theory is super important. But just be mindful that deviating from theory doesn't mean that you fail. It means that it's going to require extra awareness, extra reaction, whatever it is that it happens to be, depending on what happens. And this would be an example of that. Okay. So let's talk about those what ifs. So what happens if the base is not where I thought? We just talked about the base's performance and the base, how multiple things can impact where the base is going to, or you're going to be in relationship to that base, right? Remember the principles: present, identify, and interface, and intercept, sorry. The identify part, so hopefully at this point you've already presented and you are identifying that the base isn't where you thought it was going to be. First of all, pause, take a deep breath, and slow your heart rate down. It is very common that we get into panic mode because it's a lot farther than I thought. And now I got to be more aggressive, which means that if I have to put a brake, if I have to put the brakes on, they have to be a lot more aggressive. And if I don't, I may actually side slide. And like all kinds of problems happen when we don't pause when we should. Okay. So number one is pause. And number two, react to the new base position, right? So the base is the center and the nucleus of our formation. So react to where they are and equally intercept, and like nothing, the plan really doesn't change. The plan is still the same. But two things are required. It's like, whereas before you may had to do, if you were floating, you may have to like be mechanically legs out and then side slide to the left. You may not need to be legs out. So we react mechanically to the same theory, which is present, identify, and intercept.
Mm-hmm.
Doug, what happens if the base is off heading? It's where I thought, but they're shifted.
Well, the first thing, just like in any what if scenario, is to stop and pause and take a breath. Figure it out, right? If we can't digest the information at hand because we're over the line, as we call it, or our arousal level is too high, then all is moot. But after we've presented and we're identifying and the base is off heading, let the base settle it out. Remember, our priorities and responsibilities of the base is to set a fall rate, maintain a heading, and absorb anything that's going through the formation. So let the base sort itself out. Our goal is to put it back on the proper heading. If it stops and we've given it a courtesy time, which would be enough time for the base to settle, and if it stops moving, then that will be your new radial heading. So go through the same thing, right? We've presented, we've identified, we've paused because there's something going on in front of us that we're not sure what's going on. We've taken a breath. Okay, now the base has stopped. We're going to go through the same process. Check our boxes. Okay, identify where it is, find your radial line based off of the base, move through your radial intercept zone, be in the stadium, and then make your approach to the formation.
Yeah,
The answer to, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say there's nothing worse than if the base has a bad exit and they're still like putting it let's say that we are 90 degrees off and we're still rotating it and putting it on heading. There's nothing worse than having people like moving and reacting to that, because that's when these things happen in the radials and the stadium, and that's when we take each other out. So like Doug said, if we're still moving, hold your theoretical initial radial and give the base the chance to fix itself.
Think of the stadium as like your asylum. And if anything goes wrong, you're going to stop, hang out, get in your stadium on your theoretical radial heading based on line of flight, let everything sort itself up down there. Like, there was a flag on the field and we're sorting it out down there. Let it resolve itself. You're in the stadium, so you're in your happy place. You're watching everything before all of the chaos gets sorted out, and then you make the same approach, right? Find the base, find the heading, find your radial, move down the stadium into your approach.
Great. And then last, what if I go low? We get this question all the time, right? So actually, the first thing that we always say is like, try not to go low.
Don't go low.
Prevent going low. But the key is, what is the best way to prevent going low is actually to hold the stadium and treat it as if it was the first point. You're going to see a lot of organizers saying this. Treat the stadium as if it was the first. You have to go through, you cannot skip that step. Go through the and remember, one of the goals of the stadium is to react to the base's fall rate and to the formation's fall rate. So if you're holding the stadium correctly and you are absorbing and reacting to the fall rate that the stadium may have, that the formation may have, you will not go low. If there is a gear or a sort of fall rate adjustment to make on your clothing or something like that, that's a little bit different, right? But most times we see people going low because they don't hold the stadium, not because they need a fall rate adjustment, right? If after doing, yep, go ahead.
It's one of two things, right? Like, and it all goes by checking the boxes. Most of the time, you're going to go low out the door because of presentation. That happens. What's going to happen is you will be mispresented. and then you're low in the stadium, you haven't checked your box and gotten back up into the stadium, your asylum, your happy place, and then you over pursue. So it usually happens from initial exit. If you've had good presentation, now you can identify, you can be in the base or be in your stadium where you see in the base, you're not going to go low. Very, 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 very infrequently, just like Gorka said, do we see people go low based on just being too heavy or not geared or not have the correct equipment. It is 95% of the time, it is a technical execution of either presenting or holding the stadium. The stadium is the most important thing on the skydive, right? Get into the stadium, you can see everything that's happening, you can see all the people playing on the field in front of you, and you can make good decisions on where your line needs to be and when you can step into the formation.
So much so that you will see us and many other organizers, if on our record setting, on our camp setting, if we have the time, if we have the weather, the first couple of jumps, nobody's taking a grip, or very few people are taking a grip. We are just holding the stadium and learning the fall rate, so that when you have to take a grip, you already know what to think, what to react to, what to expect. Okay, well, let's say that after all of that, for whatever reason, 1, 2, or 3, you've gone low, or you're about to go low. Stay on the outside of the red zone, right? Try to not affect others. We come back up by staying sideways, essentially to the side of the formation. There's nothing worse than somebody like going under the entire formation, through the center. That could lead to a very dangerous funnel. So try to stay on the outsides. And number 3, continue to work up to the stadium, not to the formation, to the stadium, so that you can reset your approach and try it again. Okay. You would be surprised if the fall rate is good. And at our events, the fall rate for the base is usually really good. How many people get taken out and there is a collision and they both go low and then they make it back up? So do not stop trying, because you could actually make it back up. And if you continue trying, it actually allows us to see you. And awareness is very important on the safety side.
It's something to reiterate what Gorka was saying. So imagine that the camera is the base, and this remote that I have is, there we go, the person. What we mean by sideways is like 90 degrees to the formation, because what this is doing, this is somebody's body. If this is their head and this is their legs, if they're now looking at the camera in this direction, that's going to help them maintain the slowest and the most drag that they can get and climb back into the stadium. If you're facing the formation like this and you're looking up at it, you're going to be spilling all of your air and probably be moving forward or backwards, some things washing around underneath. So turn 90 degrees, see it underneath your arm, and then continue to get back up into the stadium. Then you can make your turn back and face the formation, and then find your stadium, and make your approach into your position.
Okay, well, that is all we had for you today. A little bit of a shorter episode compared to our exits episode, which was a lot more loaded. So thank you for staying with us, and as always, be safe and blue skies.
Have a good one. We'll see you on chapter 4.
That's right.